It's the evening of April 3rd here in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm on top of Mount Eden, the highest point in New Zealand. Just before sunset. I'm not going to see any sunset because it's really overcast. When I last recorded a video, I was on the train to the airport in Hong Kong.
In the morning, I wake up with a very minor hangover and unfortunately a backache. The bed in my friend's guest room is actually too soft. They suggest that next time I might want to take their garden hut, which has a nice and firmer bed inside, and I just might because a tiny little separate house speaks to my Estonian love of seclusion. After breakfast, we head out to check on my friend's son, who was on an overnight play date, and once we're there, the other kids' parents see me and immediately clock me as a very recent visitor over what they call my European suntan. They casually have a very New Zealand sort of house, a low-rise frame of folding wall-to-ceiling glass that is designed for maximum openness to nature. Well, that's what you get on an island with no winters and no snakes. Their house is also next to a boat dock used by the local Boy Scout chapter, and we hang out on the slipway for a while. My bald head raises concerns among the locals. Eventually it's decided that the young boys will stay here for the day, and we, along with Luna the Dalmatian, will go off on a drive around the farther reaches of Waiheke Island. Jeanette is a keen driver and is very happy to learn that, much like her dog, I don't get carsick. She's free to throw her little Land Rover around corners as much as she desires. We go over rolling hills surrounded by greenery of exactly the sort that you see in tourist videos of New Zealand, just like, this one. Eventually, we get to the far side of the island where we stop over at a local winery. My hosts are known here, and we do a cheeky little tasting as they chat with the shop staff. They pick up a bottle or two for their home, and normally I would get one as well, but schlepping it around in my suitcase for the next 4 weeks in 2 continents seems like a poor plan. Besides which, this place is expensive. I suppose that goes for the entire country, but my expectation would be that buying from a winery's on-premises stall would be cheaper than at the supermarket. Here the bottles tend towards 100 Kiwi bucks each, which, to be honest, is a bit out of my range. Even if the wine is genuinely good, well, I almost get a t-shirt instead. I suppose the cost reflects the Kiwis' love of the experience of a winery trip on its own, a whole reason to have a day out. The subject of these local peculiarities comes up when Jeanette mentions that one of the next stops on my itinerary, Queenstown on the South Island, is the home of the gallery that sells much of Ilya's art. He is an accomplished, recognized artist whose works can fetch well into 5 figures, and many of the buyers hang them up in their houses. I have a few modestly priced artworks in my own place, but in Estonia it is not at all common to have very expensive art on your wall at home. In New Zealand, apparently, it is. After more exploration, we head back into the village, pick up the younger Wellington, and go off for a burger and a milkshake. The village is full of high-end sports cars, and I remark on the inherent silliness of bringing your Porsche to a small, very hilly island. There's places here for a spirited drive, sure, but not for going very fast. Besides, the direct ferry to downtown Auckland is strictly for foot traffic. My hosts chuckle. The kind of people who buy homes on Waiheke are likely to have one Porsche to keep here and another to park on the mainland. We take Luna for a run around the beach, and then it's time for me to head back to the city. I'm almost bullied into staying for another night. Not that I'm not tempted. This bit of relaxation with a pair of extremely warm hosts was just what I needed after a Nordic winter and a series of long, tiring flights. But I have a plan, and I'd better stick to it. I get on the ferry just as the weather turns, and by the time I get back to Auckland, it's gloomy and rainy. I make my way up the central business district to my hostel on K Road, the hub of nightlife and the backpacker scene. Then I go back down the hill to a comedy club. It's Sunday night, but as my luck would have it, there's a show on. It's a charity event that brings together the top talent from the local stand-up scene at a reasonable entry cost on a normally quiet night to raise money for a good cause. Interestingly, we don't get to choose our own seats, and as a single visitor with a rather distinctive appearance, I am ushered to the front and center table, along with some other individuals. Good instinct. I used to do stand-up years ago, and I'm always willing to play along when the performer wants to do crowd work. When asked what has stuck out about New Zealand for me so far, I say it's the fact that the beers at this bar are a whopping $9 each. The host does a double take and asks the crowd if the beers really are only $9. The next morning I make my way down to the waterfront for a walking tour. I've done a lot of these tours in a lot of places around the world, and usually they are excellent. The one in Auckland is the most disappointing yet. The guide, a middle-aged woman, is knowledgeable and informative but lacks spirit or personality. Still, I learned some history. After the tour, I make my way along the boardwalk down to the seafood market, where I have an extremely fresh and very tasty fish and chips lunch. Then I buy some emergency sunblock. I circle around and go past St. Matthew's in the city, a nice little church in the center of Auckland, and over to the very impressive building of the Auckland Art Museum, where I spend a few hours, and then later in the afternoon head south to Mount Eden to watch the sunset from one of the city's highest points. As you can see, it's overcast. Then I head back down and find a good ramen place on Simmons Street for dinner. I consider my options for the rest of the night and head west on Ponsonby Road, one of the satellite walking roads in the area. I'm not in the mood for a bar, necessarily, but there is a supermarket still open where I can at least get a beer to drink back at the hostel, help me sleep. Ponsonby runs along the crest of a hill, and as I walk back, I take some wonderful shots of the Auckland skyline lit up for the night. And I have my beer and head in for the night.
Welcome to Wellington, just as I am saying goodbye to Wellington. I am on the ferry from Wellington to Picton to the South Island, and I have been here for about a day and a half. My last day in Auckland, I went to the Auckland Domain and Auckland Museum. Auckland Domain is this giant park in the middle of Auckland. Went to the Botanical Gardens, then to the museum. Spent way more time in the museum than I thought. It was a really big, really nice museum. Went to Parnell Village, had a walk through Parnell Village. Then went back for my suitcase, had some really, really nice khao soi in a Thai place just next to my hostel on K Road. And then went down to the bus, and on my last day it was pouring down. It was so rainy. Fortunately, most of the time I was indoors or under an awning. There are a lot of awnings in Auckland and really like in most of New Zealand. It was the remains of a tropical storm that had battered Australia and then came over and then did a number on New Zealand. So I got on the bus. I'd booked a gold service like a comfy seat, extra comfy seat on a double-decker bus. The bus was a single-decker replacement bus that had no power points, no Wi-Fi, and not even an onboard toilet, and it was an overnight bus. But I got my 38 euros back, and effectively I traveled for $1. Well, $5 with the booking fee, so $5 total, which was very much fine. So arrived in Wellington at really, really early yesterday. Left my bags at the hostel. Went straight down to the Vito Works, the design studio, like manufacture studio for props. These guys do movie props. They've worked on Lord of the Ring, District 9, Chappie, a bunch of other movies. Really, really impressive people. I had a tour of their workshop. Now, I have a sort of like vested interest in the topic because I host cosplay shows. The quality of stuff, like the quality of product that these guys produce there, professional, like hero props, so there were actual props from Lord of the Rings and stuff. The quality of those props is not higher than the really good stuff I've seen in cosplay. Like the top end of European cosplay, let's say the top half of any given year's Euro Cosplay Championship finals, is easily as good. Obviously, like these Weta studios, you know, they're actually doing it on deadline, on order. They're coming up with a lot of the creative stuff themselves, so this is not to disparage them. But it is more of a comment on what cosplay has achieved and what this sort of proves on what cosplayers can do in Europe and elsewhere now compared to what the pros do. So went to Weta Studios, then from there came back to town. By the way, $5 for a bus ticket, a one-way bus ticket here. This really is a ridiculously expensive country. And then I went to the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa. Free entry, including this amazing exhibition on Gallipoli, done actually with a lot of help from the Weta Works people. They did a lot of the presentation there, and it was really, really cool. So then after that I met up with a local here who I met through the Horizons Unlimited forum. Met up with her. We had dinner at this place called Shed 5, which is like fancy restaurant. I had a nice chat, had a nice dinner, then went back to the hostel. Yeah, had a local beer. Beer is expensive here. Beer is expensive, like 5-6 euros at a shop for a local microbrew. Woke up this morning, the hostel was nice. The YHA in Wellington is very nice. I think a lot better than the Haka Lodge in Auckland. My white jacket that I traveled with has finally bit the bullet. It's finally worn out. It was coming apart at the seams. It was worn through in several places. It was absolutely soaked. I dried it overnight, but it was still absolutely soaked. I talked to the local friend, and she told me where the discount stores were. Discount like outdoor gear stuff. And so I got this waterproof sort of outer jacket, light outer jacket without a lining, for $100, so for like 66 euros, which for a garment like this is actually pretty good value. And after that I went to the Parliament, because you can take a free tour of the Parliament building in New Zealand. I went on the big hour-long tour, saw a lot of stuff about the Parliament. There was actually a pretty good discussion with like a lot of questions from some from me, but mostly from locals, about the Parliament works in New Zealand, how it all works, how democracy is structured, etc. Again, free. Then I walked down to the harbour front again, had some nice chicken soup on the way. It's chicken soup sort of weather. And after that I went down to the Wellington Museum, which is in an old bond warehouse. And it's actually the museum of the city of Wellington and stuff that's been happening in Wellington city itself. Again, it's free. Most of the museums in Wellington are free. Weta Studios was not free, but it's a private thing. The state museums are basically all free. Then I picked up my luggage, had my luggage stored in the city next to the train station where the shuttle leaves from. Went to a supermarket and picked up a local beer, a milk stout, a local microbrew milk stout, and some chocolate milk. I have been a little bit too dependent on chocolate milk in my previous travels. I really love it when they do really good chocolate milk, and they do really good like flavored milk, like sweet milk here. I've been buying small bottles and keeping to small bottles because there are a lot of calories in it, and I've been trying to lose weight. But the stuff that I have now is stuff that I had on the bus as well, coming over from Auckland to Wellington. It's like orange chocolate milk, and it's really good, really, really good. I love it. And of course, this is a dairy country, right? New Zealand is dairy country, so they take their milk very, very seriously. And now I'm on the ferry. The ferry takes a few hours to go across the Cook Strait down to the South Island, to Picton. It arrives at like 8:30. It leaves at 5 o'clock. It arrives at 8:30, so it's like 3.5 hours. And I've got accommodation booked there. I've got a hostel in Picton. Then tomorrow morning at 7:30, I'm getting on the gold bus, the gold seat on the double-decker bus, and I'm going down to Christchurch. It'll be an all-day drive through some very scenic roads, because the main flat, fast highway between the top of the South Island and Christchurch is closed because of the November earthquake. So we'll be going through the mountains, through sort of the local small roads. Arrive in Christchurch at like past 3 o'clock, something like that. And I suppose that's where I'll see you next.